Hello, I am Moodita, and welcome back to Satisfactory. This is my 1.0 playthrough where I attempt to load balance all my factories. For some reason, this is what I call fun. In the last video, I added a new factory in the Rocky Desert. The first stage of this factory is making 20 nuclear pasta per minute, so it didn't take too long to build up the 1000 I need for this final stage of the space elevator. Today, I'm going to take that 20 pasta and turn them into 200 Singularity Cells. Only problem is power. This new addition will take a good amount more power than I have available. This is the last major part I need before I go nuclear, so more power is around the corner. But first, I'll need a temporary solution. And for that temporary solution, here we are in the blue crater. So the nice thing about this location is it's just got tons of oil available. If we take a look at the fuel generator and click on the fuel, we can see all the different fuels I can burn. So these are basically my options. We can immediately run out liquid biofuel because that's just not sustainable. It's a cool option to have, but for this, not what I'm going for. That leaves me the other 4 fuel options. I still think the best bang for the buck is rocket fuel. But the idea with this power plant is that it's going to be temporary, so I also want this to be easy to build and easy to delete. The rocket fuel sure isn't hard, but it requires the coal, the sulfur, and the nitrogen. If I just take out the nitrogen, I can still do turbo fuel, which is obviously much more efficient than the regular fuel, but then I have to still involve the extra coal. So turbo fuel probably isn't a bad option to keep things nice and simple. However, if I really want to keep things simple, just regular fuel is pretty nice. And so this is what I came up with. It all fits in one blueprint. I put out an in-depth video going over how to build this blueprint, so if you want a more in-depth look into that, there should be a video linked up in the top right. But let me quickly go over it for you. Let's go ahead and start with the refinery. So this refinery is set to the heavy oil residue alternate recipe. It is completely overclocked, so it'll intake 75 crude oil and output 100 heavy oil residue, with the byproduct that we're just going to sink of the polymer resin. That heavy oil residue just snakes right around here and plugs right into our blender. I'm using the diluted fuel alternate recipe with this one. With this overclocked to 200%, it'll intake the 100 heavy oil residue, and then I just need to add 200 water, and this will create 200 fuel. The water pipe is just going to get plugged in right here. And as you can see, the output just comes right along here and just goes straight down through the middle and then right down into 4 load balance fuel generators. Each of these fuel generators are completely overclocked to 250%. So as we can see, the normal burn rate would be 20 a minute. Fully overclocked, the burn rate will be 50. And so 4 of these will use up that exact 200 fuel per minute that the blender is creating. With each one creating 625 megawatts, each blueprint will create 2.5 gigawatts of power. And so yes, turbo fuel or rocket fuel would be much more efficient, but since this is going to be temporary, I can build the majority of this with one click, and then later on when I want to get rid of it, I can delete it with one click, which just saves me so much time. So let me clean up this mess and lay down some foundations, and we'll start placing them. And now I've got a few platforms. Even though I can make 6x6, I went ahead and just used the 5x5. That way the blueprint can just snap right on top of them. Even though this needs the Mark III designer, it's really only for the height. This actually still fits in a 5x5 area. So it makes doing this really easy. And because each one of these needs 90 motors, I have to wait for the 4th one. But it doesn't really take too long, and I love having this all fit in one blueprint. So the beauty of this is the numbers. This needs 75 crude oil. The 2 of these would be 150, which is what one impure node fully overclocked is, and 4 of these will take care of one normal node. So I've got 4 here, I'll set up 4 here, and then 4 and 4. So if each one produces 2.5 gigawatts and I'm going to place 16 of them, that should be a nice quick and easy 40. Not too shabby. Let me show you how this gets finished off. So right below the water pipe, I'm going to place 1 foundation. And then I'm going to grab a pump and I'm going to place it right on the quarter mark of the foundation. And now I have something to more or less snap my water extractor to. And I may have to play around with this. This is awfully high off the water. But it's also all temporary, so I may just leave it. Basically, with that spacing, this will make a nice right angle. Nice clean pipework. Then for the rest of it, I can just connect these. And then I'll just plug the oil in right here. And then the last thing to do is connect all these mergers. Using the power towers, I brought power down here from, I think it's a water well that I'm grabbing with drones. So really didn't take too much to bring that down here. But that's basically the setup. It's real easy. So let me get the rest of these set up, and then we'll flip the switch and get some extra power. This is what I've turned this beautiful crater lake into. I guess it's kind of beautiful in its own weird way. Let's run through it. So we've just got a random line of belt. I just decided to connect all of the mergers together, and that way I just need one sink at the very end for all of the polymer resin. Which, now that I'm thinking about it, these last couple actually need to be Mark 6. So I think it only needs to be the very last one. In total, it should be 800 polymer resin, and we're just going to sink it. So I got these all set up. I just laid down some extra foundations just because it was a little bit easier doing this one, since that one didn't quite fit right there. It just clips right into it, so I needed to move that one over. But this should be pretty easy to mass delete when it comes time. I swear, this is all temporary. And as far as the oil goes, we've got the one pure and then two normal nodes. So we've got one Mark II pipe. And since this is such a short distance, there's really no point in joining these into a Mark II pipe. I find it much more reliable just to keep them as two separate pipes. One of them goes here, feeds those four. This one goes here, feeds these four. And then the Mark II comes up and then goes all the way around to feed those 8. Now, normally if you're going to rely on the full 600 out of the pipe, this is probably not the most ideal setup, but I'm sure it'll work. And all I need to do is connect this to the main power and start the stopwatch. And this is what I was waiting for, the last oil extractor to completely back up. So now let's just start powering everything on. A nice slow and steady climb. I finally beat my max consumption again. Yes! Not that that's really an issue, because at this point, there's kind of no way for all of the particle accelerators, all of the converters, the freight platforms, because there's a whole bunch that I'm not even using, but they add to that max consumption. That's alright, so now we are up to 246. So we got a nice little extra boost from that. So it looks like we're peaking at about 192. We've got 246. Ah, beautiful. You love to see it. And this is why I love blueprints. This entire project actually took me just under an hour, including starting up the factory. For an extra 40 gigawatts, I'll take it. As you already know, the goal for today is going to be turning all the pasta into Singularity Cells. And this is essentially the last milestone I have to unlock. So let's go ahead and select this milestone. I've got plenty of these, and these, and these. I do not have these though. And I haven't even picked up any at crash sites or anything, so looks like it's time to head over to the random room. And here we have my temporary setup that was making some power shards, and I've got a good amount of them stored up. I still have, I think that should be over 1,000 left in my dimensional depot, plus everything in storage here. So I think that should last me for a little bit, so let's switch this over. Using the quantum encoder, let's switch it to the superposition oscillator. And hey, I've already got 2 of these things already done. So now I just need to grab crystal oscillators and aluminum sheets. Alright, go dimensional depot. Saves me the 30-second trip around the corner. Good thing I added all that extra power. Forgot just how much these things use when you sloop them. This definitely isn't making enough, so let's make sure we change that. And that's set to 250. And so this, we just need to overclock, just so it doesn't shut off. And there we go, my first superposition oscillators. It is a really cool model. And because I've got the extra power now, I may just overclock this just so I can knock out this 100 real quick. And with a couple power shards, it took no time at all. Let's finally turn this in.
You are free to attempt a study and replication of either portal or warp technology. After you're done with project assembly.
After you've done your work. Oh, that's going to be exciting. Portals is something I've been really looking forward to. But there's quite a bit of work before we can get to that. Alright, now I have enough power, and I can actually set the recipe for the item. I think I'm set to go back out to the Rocky Desert. Let's finally get to working on this project. So for this project, there's not a lot of blueprints for the actual machines. Most of the blueprints are for all of the hallways and walls and all that sort of stuff later on. But let's take a look at the one that I do have. And here's what's going to take care of the final stage of today's project. So let's open up the manufacturer and take a look. So we've got the Singularity Cell. As far as I know, there's only one recipe for these. Normally they make 10 a piece, so I would need 20 if I wanted to make 200 a minute. But if I fully overclock these, I can bring it down to only needing 8 manufacturers. We've already taken care of the pasta. I pretty much just have to make everything else. And these are in some hefty quantities. And that's where the challenge for today is really just the scale. It's a good amount of concrete, a good amount of iron plates, and a good amount of dark matter crystals actually. But I figured out a good way to take care of this, and we'll get to that next. I modified my theme from my electronics factory, and I basically propped this up on a power storage in each corner to add a little bit more. And here in the front is where the pasta is going to come in. And then on the back, I have an input for the other 3 parts. So the idea with this one is, since I have 4 sides, each side will end up having 2 of these. So it's going to go somewhere around here. And then there will be another one on this side. And then 2 on each of the sides. I've already got the pasta coming up here. I'll have to redo how I have them kind of being merged up, but that's obviously pretty easy to do. And then I'll be able to send that straight into there. And then I'll just have to come inside here, which I didn't give myself an easy way to do it. But this gives me kind of all the flexibility to plug everything in kind of where I want it to go. And plenty of room to work with inside of here. This blueprint will bring all of the parts together and create the final product. But for the rest of those parts, let's take a look at the flowchart. Thankfully, we already have the nuclear pasta out of the way. So next up is the 2000 iron plates, and to make that I'm going to use the coated iron plate alternate recipe, which is a fantastic way to cut down on the amount of iron you need, and I only need 200 plastic. For the 4000 concrete, I'm going to be using the wet concrete alternate recipe, so that I only need 6000 limestone and 5000 water. Now for the fun part, the 400 dark matter crystals. For that I'm going to be using the dark matter trap alternate recipe, because it dramatically cuts down on the amount of SAM you need. And the difference with this is we need to take the diamonds and turn them into time crystals first. And for the diamonds, I'm going with the cloudy diamonds alternate recipe, so it'll need 9600 limestone and 4800 coal. And then 2000 SAM if I wasn't going to use summer sloops. Well, I have a ton of empty space down here. I think it's finally time to start filling it up. The concrete and the iron plates I'm going to do all kind of together. I think it'll just be easier keeping all of those machines together. However, for the rest of this, I think I can split it up so that I kind of have 4 different sections around here. And I think it'll come together pretty well. So let's start off with the particle accelerator. And I want to find the center, which should be whichever one is basically flat with this pattern. I think is this one right here. And yeah, right about there. I think 2 foundations here, and this is pretty much centered. I wanted the inputs to line up nicely, so I merged it over just 1 meter. So we'll start here, and then I need 5. So we'll do 2 on either side. And we just want to come in here and select our cloudy diamonds alternate recipe. And these ones I'm going to leave at 100%. So they're going to intake 240 coal and 480 limestone each and output 20 diamonds. Now the next step needs a converter, and I am going to give myself just one foundation of a gap in between here and place these just right in front. I may even need to push these in a little bit if I need more space. But these ones are going to be turning the diamonds into time crystals. These ones need to get overclocked to 166.66 repeating percent, and then that way they will intake the 20 diamonds that these particle accelerators are outputting and turn them into 10 time crystals. And then for the last step, I need to go with another particle accelerator. And for this, I want to line it up with one of the inputs here. And yeah, I'm definitely going to push these converters back a little bit, I think. Just a little bit, but just to give you the idea. This will go here. And then I'll be able to put a merger here. This middle one will get a splitter. And then this one will also get a merger. And a second particle accelerator will go on this side. And for this, I'm using the dark matter trap alternate recipe. And these are basically going to get paired up 1-to-1. So if we take a look at the manufacturer recipe, I need 50 dark matter crystals per minute. So thankfully with these, I get to underclock them. Saves me just a tiny bit of power. And so I need 25 time crystals. Each one of these output 10. So here's 10, here's 10. And then this one, we're just going to split in half. So here's 5. So there's the 25 I need there. And then we just have a mirrored setup on this side. Now the other requirement for these is the dark matter residue. Alright, and for this last part, what I'm going to do is give myself just a little platform to work with, which will make a little bit more sense in just a second. For this, I need the converter. And this one I am going to flip around so that the output is facing this way. This is going to be creating my dark matter residue. And this one is going to be completely overclocked so that it's producing 250 because each one needs 125. Alright, just for this example, I needed to push these particle accelerators back, but I'm going to fix all the spacing in just a second and then I'll show you. But the reason why I had this on its little 2-meter platform, because now when it exits, both sides are going to be completely even. Because I would want to get up and over the belt somehow. I'm definitely going to move this in just a second, but the reason for lifting this up is now both of the pipes exit the same way. Because if this was on the same level, I would either have to lift this belt up and over, or this pipe would have to go up and over. And especially with pipes, I would rather just keep things as symmetrical as possible on both sides. It usually just makes things run a little bit smoother. Alright, let me rearrange this just a little bit. That is all of the big machines. So I wanted to get those out of the way because they kind of dictate where I have some free space, which happens to be in all 4 corners. So these actually didn't take up quite as much space as I thought they would. I thought this whole setup was going to be a little bit bigger, but thankfully not too bad. So I think I'm going to use underneath to do a good amount of the initial load balancing. So I'll probably just have the belts come out somewhere around here so that you still get to see a little bit of the belt of the initial material going in. But since there's 5 on each side, that means most likely I'm going to be doing some 5-way splits, and so I think I'm just going to hide that underneath because I've just got so much space under here. Even though not a ton right here, I'll just pave over this area, maybe. And there'll still be plenty of space to do all of that kind of logistics. A lot of the initial load balancing will be done down here, but then once we get up here, everything should be pretty straightforward and nice and clean. And I'm lazy enough that now I just delete the entire blueprint and replace it instead of having to find the pattern. Yep. Okay, so that takes care of the dark matter crystals. Now we just needed to do the iron plates and the concrete. So if I come way up here, this will give me a better idea of where I should put what. Since I'll be getting the water from over there, especially for the wet concrete, it needs quite a bit, so I don't want to take it just too far. So I think I'll do the wet concrete here. And then if I'm going to have all the pipes come in somewhere over here, I think I'll do the iron plates back here in this corner because it'll only need one pipe. So running the one pipe down this side won't be too bad. And then that'll leave both of the front corners, largely because that little bit's sticking out and I just don't feel like working around it right now. So we'll leave both of the front two corners for something in the future. This will be the bulk of what this factory does, but I have a feeling I'll be back here by the end of the playthrough. And I'm going to start with the iron plates. So for this, I'm just going to use my 4 refinery blueprint. And thankfully, I just need 2 of them. I'm going to go ahead and delete these wire connections because I'm going to do the power just a little bit differently. Alright, so first things first, let's set the recipe. We're using the pure iron ingot. Instead of making the exact amount of iron ingots I need, which is 1,000, it would require just a really awkward amount of iron ore and water. So instead, I'm going to make 1,040, and I'm going to be using 8 refineries. And so these are actually only going to be clocked to 200%. Each one of these needs 70 iron ore, so I just need to go through and upgrade all of these to Mark II and go through the rest of the belts and make sure that they're the right speeds. And then I just need to bring the two together by placing one more splitter right here in the middle. And then we'll go ahead and place some temporary ones on either one of these. I can place the lift and delete the splitters, and now I can change these to the correct speeds. So this is going to be 560 iron ore coming in. So if I split it in half, each one of these would need to be 280. So go ahead and make these Mark IV. And then this is where the initial ore will get plugged in. And then I'll just need to redo these pipes so that they're all connected because I only need 320 water, so I can fit that all on just one Mark II. The next step is going to be merging these up together. And I'm going to get these to all merge right here in the middle. Each machine is outputting 130, so I just need a Mark III in between the machine and the first mergers. And I'll go ahead and just use Mark VI for the rest of these. As I mentioned, I'm making a little bit extra, and so to deal with that, I'm just going to go with the easy route and use a smart splitter. And for the smart splitter, the overflow is going to go straight ahead, and the priority is going to go here to the right. And now what I can do is place a splitter here, and even though this is pretty close to being full, the speed difference is pretty crazy. So if I just put a Mark I here, some of those gaps will end up transferring. So I just need a small section of Mark I so that it gets limited down to 60 per minute, which is what I want. And then I'll just use a bit of faster belt just to make sure that this stays full. And as I mentioned, I'm making an extra 40 per minute. I'm just going to go ahead and siphon off 60 with the Mark I belt, split it 3 ways. We're going to take 20 and send that back onto here. And the extra 20 and 20, here is our 40. I'm just going to send that down below and I'm going to sink it until I have a use for it, if I ever have a use for it. And so coming out of here is my 1,000 ingots that I need. And to turn those ingots into the iron plates, I just need my 4 assembler blueprint. And I just need 3 of them because I need 12 in total. You may want to scoot that over just a little bit. And load balancing 12 is really easy because I have 3 sets of blueprints. So I just need to add one more stack right in front of here. The iron plates will plug into here, so I'll actually want to just swap this merger so it's facing this way. I just need to reconnect those belts. So the iron plates will come in here, and then the 200 plastic, which I'm going to bring in by drone, will just get plugged in right here. Put those into the 3 different mergers here, and we've got all 12 assemblers load balanced. Alright, let's go ahead and set the recipe. For these, I need 2,000 iron plates, and I'm going to be using 12 machines. So 222.22%. Copy and paste that. There's a little bit of cleaning up to do, but that's basically how that's going to get taken care of. Let's head to the other corner and look at the concrete. Okay, so I lied and I completely forgot that I did make one more dedicated blueprint for this. And it was for this section right here. So let me just throw one down so we can take a look. It's my basic tube refinery blueprint. The only thing is I have all of the colors set and the recipes. I'm using the wet concrete and we have this completely overclocked to 250%, meaning each refinery needs 300 limestone and 250 water. And that's why these are in pairs and their own blueprints, because each pair would need 500 water. So I could overclock these to just 200% and then I could pair up 3 of them, but then I'm dealing with 3 of them that are doing 240, that's 720. I think it'll be much easier to deal with just 500 pipes of water, and then I can deal with 600 at a time. Since I'm dealing with so much, I'm basically just dealing with full Mark 6 belts, which are 1200, so with these requiring 300 is just a nice number to work with. And this is how I'm going to do power for probably all of downstairs here, is I'm just going to run a beam kind of where it's convenient, and then just run a cable down beneath. It's out of the way enough, and since all my walkways are going to be pretty well elevated, I didn't feel like going through the hassle of trying to hide every single cable through the machine and do it all underneath like I was doing with the other one. This is a nice happy medium for me. So on this side I just need 600 limestone to plug into here and a 500 pipe of water. And with these I need 10 of these blueprints because I need 20 refineries in total, which is a lot better than the 50 I would need without overclocking them. Okay, well, there's 4, so I could probably mirror the 2 4. We'll have all of the inputs facing the same way. So I need to place 2 more sets of these blueprints. I think in kind of this empty spot on either side here, I'll put that last blueprint. So this one can go here, and then this one can go right over here. I have to mess around with the spacing a little bit, but somewhere around here, because with these I pretty much just need floor holes, so that's gonna go there, and then a pipe one over here. And so with a bunch of these I can pair them up so that, you know, these two are together. So instead of having to split it down below into 2 600 belts, I can just split it up here, and then that way there's just a little bit less going on downstairs. So I can just do some of the really easy load balancing up here. That'll be 600, that'll be 600. And then we'll just have the Mark 6 plug in right there. And then all of these will just get their own 500 pipe. It's coming along pretty well. The big old pit isn't so empty anymore. So next up for me is going to be finishing kind of this really basic belting and getting it so where I just need to plug in the inputs down below. And then it'll be figuring out kind of where all of the final products go, because obviously I need to bring them up to these manufacturers. So I'm probably going to figure out some way to do some fun lifts up here to kind of display all the items while they're traveling up here. And after a little trial and error, this is what I came up with. So we've got a nice little vertical lift to bring all of the products up to the manufacturers that just kind of go right around on either side of this thing. And so the products will come up here and then branch off to either of the manufacturers. And this is the real simple blueprint that I came up with. So really easy to make, just 2 full frame windows on top of each other, a beam, and then for this I just placed it, and then if you rotate it 3 clicks, it'll be at a 45-degree angle. So I did that on the front too, and then just placed square 0.5 meter signs. And yeah, so super basic. Really simple, but the reason I did this is to go this distance, you need to use the infinite lift trick. So I needed to place one more foundation here so that I could use the lifts. And then on the bottom, we just have everything plugging up into there. And then I wanted to make sure everything fit, so I just went ahead and did the load balancing for this, but it's honestly really simple. The way I have this set up is one particle accelerator just goes straight into one manufacturer, so that gets its own belt on either side. The next one up is the iron plates. And so this is where one half is going, the other half is going to this side. And those are coming from this splitter, which if we follow this back, is coming from this half. So this is how I decided to split up the iron plates. Since I have 3 groups of 4, the middle one is outputting to a splitter. So half of it goes to there, and then half of it goes to here, so that I have 2 equal belts going in opposite directions. So this will feed this lift and that lift, and then this belt will go around and feed this lift and that lift. Since we're only having to deal with halves and quarters, it just makes my life easy. And then the last one is the concrete. So real similar setup, it's just coming from an opposite direction. So the initial belt is coming in here, half of it goes here, half of it goes here. The difference with the concrete compared to the iron plates is I need twice as much. So each one of the 4 sides of the factory gets its own belt. So if we follow these back to over here, each machine is outputting 200. So together, here's 400, here's 400. So into here would be 8. And then I just have this secondary one. Instead of having these grouped together, they're just separated. So the 200 from this refinery is getting grouped up with that 800 to make my 1000. And then same with this one. This one's just going to the second pair. And I did that with the same thing on the other side. So these 2 belts are going to feed this side and that side. And then the same thing with the other side. Those 2 belts will feed these 2 lifts and then the far one. And to make these, I'm sure most of you know, but just in case you don't, the infinite lift trick is really cool. So if I take a lift and I were to go from down here, there's no way for it to reach the very top here. But if I place a floor hole here first, the trick is it has to end in the floor hole. So if I start from here, it still has the same limitation. I can't go to the very bottom. However, if I just start down here at the bottom, and then I go up and I look at the floor hole, now it does have to be in the right spot because they can't curve or anything. So if this is 1 meter off in any of the directions, it just won't clip. So you do have to make sure that they're completely lined up, but you can make lifts as long as possible. And so that's how I get these to just go all the way up with just 1. And then with the blueprint, I just lock it into place, nudge it right to where I want it. There we go. And now I can go ahead and put it in blueprint mode. All right, so I did make sure the arrow is where the open side is. So that's facing the lifts. As long as I make sure the arrow is right there, just zoop these all the way down. And then because I thought this looked a little bit weird, what I did is I just took another beam and then I zoop it all the way across. And then I did this. So I took this and I zooped it all the way across, but instead of leaving it flat, I'm going to rotate it the 3 clicks. And then that way it's at a 45-degree angle and it kind of covers both of the edges a bit better. Then I'm just going to do that all the way across. And I like the way that it looks. And then for the very top, I decided to just keep using the beams to kind of hide the foundation and just kind of give it a different look. I don't think I would want to use this for a huge section of wall or anything, but for just some small pieces like this, I think it adds a nice little extra touch. So I need to finish this and the other 2 walls, and then it's on to the load balancing. Alright, now all 4 of the sides have all of their lifts in place. So now, let's head downstairs. I have been busy, so it's a lot of just dragging belts from one place to the next. So I've been working on the limestone. So each machine needs 240 coal or 80 limestone. So since I'm doing these in groups of 5, let's take a look. So 240 times 5, hey, there's a full 1200 belt right there. So for the coal, I just need 1 belt to plug into each of these 4 systems and do a 5-way split. Thankfully, I have a blueprint to do that. Now, since this is double, we already kind of know. For the limestone, 480 each, so I need 2 completely full Mark 6 belts for each of these sides. And this is what I came up with. So to get 480 on each one, it's going to get plugged into this madness. So the idea with this is I can plug in 2 completely full Mark 6 belts, and then they'll both get split 5 ways, and then basically 1/5 from each of those belts will get grouped together, and then each one of those belts will head on into a particle accelerator. So I went ahead and laid out all 4 because I figured this was the bulkiest part of all the load balancing, and from there I can kind of work around it. Since I've got a good amount of space in the middle here in between them all, this is where I'll do the load balancing for the coal. And for that, I just need a much more simple toned down version where I can just plug in 1 belt And this one is also designed to deal with the max belt speed. So I'm just going to set one of these in each of the 4 sides, somewhere around here, and then another one over here, and so on. And then now I'll only need to figure out how to get those belts over here, plug them into the initial splitters, and then I just need to plug up each one of these into its own particle accelerator. And that'll be both the limestone and the coal taken care of. Dealing with the 5-way splits isn't necessarily the most convenient, but with the right numbers and the right overclocking, you can make all of this quite a bit simpler. So I don't think this ended up being too bad. Now the trick is going to be to find all this material. I'm already bringing in some extras, like this is a full Mark 6 belt. I've already got some of the limestone plugged in, and then I'm just going to need to turn on the SAM. However, this unfortunately isn't quite enough. I didn't want to spend too much time belting in a whole bunch of nodes that I wasn't using, and so I kept it a little too light, unfortunately, in my initial bussing of the area. So ones like this limestone node that are right next to my bus, I'm definitely going to grab. There's another pure one just right on the back side of the factory, so definitely going to need to grab this one. And then there's a couple more all the way out here, right next to the ocean. So I'll combine these 2 normal nodes, and that's the equivalent of a pure node, so that definitely helps. And I think that with all of the rest of the limestone that I've grabbed should be enough. Now for the coal, that I definitely don't have enough of. I have 1200 on this belt and 600 on this belt, so there's 18 out of the 4800. And then here's that other 1200 belt. So I've got 3000, but I need 4800, so I'm still short 1.5 pure nodes. And if we take a look at the map, I've pretty much taken all of the coal that's closest. So the next closest is up here, just right on top of this cliff here. So if we come up over these waterfalls, we come to a nice little lake. And right over here, we've got some coal nodes. So here's a pure, and there's a pure. Currently, I only need 1.5 of these, but if I'm gonna grab them, I might as well just grab all of them. Oh, a Mercer sphere I missed. Don't mind if I do. And even though the distance isn't too far, we come right to the edge, the fog kind of goes away. So I could definitely make a bus. I've made longer ones, but I think this will be a really cool spot for a train. It'll be nice and short, so carrying this much ore won't be really that much of an issue. And it'll let me grab this SAM node that's right in the middle of the next lake. So it's only an impure, and I'm actually going to need a tiny bit more than this. And that is what I'm going to do next. I'm going to build a train station here, and then figure out some way to get that train down into the factory. Here's my little train station. So really simple. I've still got a little bit more finishing touches to do on here, but the basics are done. So we've just got a really simple setup. So the lines will come up here, and then they'll go into a splitter. And that way each one of these is only carrying 600 instead of the full 1200. When you're dealing with ore, it's a little bit tricky to move that full amount, because each freight car can only hold 3200. So if we're moving 1200, that means it needs to complete its trip in 2 minutes and 40 seconds. And that includes the docking animation on both sides, which is about 28 seconds. Let's just round up and say 30, just because I don't think anybody wants to cut it that close. So that means travel time, it only has 1:40. And even though the distance isn't that far, it's a little close. So instead, I split it in half, and then you've got more than enough time for it to complete its round trip. I decided to just build this right on top of the 3 coal nodes. I figured that would just be easiest, and that way I don't have to build the little housing for them and a separate train station. I'll just build it right on top. And then for the SAM, if we come right out here, you can see we've got the one little housing. I've already got the constructors. Since it's an impure node, I figured I might as well just turn it into the reanimated SAM right away. And then that's going to come right on into here, and that gets its own singular freight car. Alright, for the next part, let's go through some more blueprints. So I gotta give credit where credit is due. I learned this method from Drawing Xaos, so I'll put his YouTube channel in the description. He puts out some great content. And then I just modified it a little bit to fit what I wanted. I decided to basically create a round pillar using the outer corner extensions, and then just frame it with the frame walls and some beams. So this is the first part. This creates the pillar that the spiral is gonna go around. And then the second piece is the arm that gets attached to it. This right here is going to get attached to the side. It'll make a lot more sense in a second. But I just made it out of 1 meter foundations and then some beams. And then I found that you can use the 2 meter ramp. Your train just won't go nearly as fast. Now, thankfully, the way that I have this thing set up is it's going to be full on its downhill journey, and then it's going to be an empty train when it's coming uphill. So thankfully, going uphill, it definitely isn't going to reach its top speed. In fact, I don't even think it's going to hit 100 kilometers per hour going uphill. It'll probably be around 90 or something, which is a little on the slow side. But by using the 2 meter instead of the 1 meter ramp, you need a whole lot less, and it has to spend a lot less time at doing the actual spiral. Alright, so those are the 2 blueprints, and I actually have 2 versions of these. The other one just has the ramp facing the other direction so that I don't have to change it around. Alright, so let's follow the train. So it's going to immediately curve right around here, and originally I was thinking it would come out this way, but if we come up over this edge, the spiral wasn't going to be able to go down quite as far if I spiraled right here, and then I've got to go up and over this thing and then into the factory. So instead, I'm going to go over to this side and then go down and we'll come into the factory. Okay, fine, I'll be honest. It's because I wanted the spiral right in front of the waterfall. The reason this is here is I wanted to find, on the world grid, just because that would make things a little bit easier. I thought I found a spot and then zooped it up because I need this to be at just the right height so that the initial one can just merge onto here smoothly. And now I can delete all of these. And in blueprint mode, I can go ahead and just fill in the whole pillar. I like it so far. Alright, so I've got my initial one here. And then what I need to do is place a straight piece. Got locked into place. Alright, now we can delete these. Look at them all match. There we go. Okay, so now I'm just going to need to connect that with the rest of the railway, so I'll just have to do a little bit of curving here, but now everything's at the same height. So at least that part's taken care of. And then from here, I can go ahead and lay my initial piece. That'll go to right here. And now we can kind of build the spiral off of this. And the way placing these spiral arms work is for each one of these pillar blueprints, we're going to place one of these arms. We're just going to go down one and rotate 90 degrees. So this one will go here. Now the trick is, since I put these beam connectors on there, it doesn't snap right next to it. Unfortunately, you have to nudge each one of these 2 meters. Not my favorite thing, but I also like it better than having to go back and reattach them. So that one goes there, nudge 2, rotate, nudge 2, rotate. And now that we're at the bottom, I just want to do the same thing and build off of a straight piece. And this is what it should look like before you put the rails in. Kind of chaotic. So for the initial piece of track, you want it to be on the half mark of this foundation, and then you can go as far or as short as you want. You'll need to go to at least that 1 meter mark right there. And then from here, you're just going to go all the way around and keep connecting to the same spot right in the middle of the foundation. And spacing should be just right so that you get a nice 90-degree turn each time. And there you go. Beautiful spiral. Now I just need to connect the top end right here, and then this rail line will probably come out a little bit, and then it'll turn and then head on into the factory. There it is in action. Oh, spirals are great. I really should have made one sooner. I forgot just they're actually really easy to make. And there it goes. So yeah, it just heads on straight for a bit and then makes a right, ramps down a little bit more, and then on into the factory. And turns out I needed these limestone as well. So I went ahead and grabbed up these two, merged them together so they're on a Mark 6 belt. And then this one just goes along on its own Mark 5. Just had to extend this. That was the easiest way I could think of. And once it gets to this one, Then it just raises up, goes into a merger, and merges up with the 600 from this normal limestone node. So now I have an extra 2 limestone nodes that I needed. And here is the train station. So I've just got my normal train balancers right here. So we've just merging up 2 of the 600s together. So I've got the full Mark 6 belt. And everything's looking good so far. And then just the one freight platform that's doing the 150 of the reanimated SAM. Alright, so out of the major pieces, I think I've gotten pretty much all the coal accounted for now. I think I've gotten all the limestone that I need. The iron is easy. I actually just need 1 node for that. So that definitely wasn't an issue. So I have some of the SAM sorted out, but I need to sort out the rest of it. And then plastic. Thankfully I only need 200, so bringing it in is pretty easy. Now normally, with all of these drone ports, and me only needing 200 plastic, the drone probably makes the most sense. And because I worded it like that, you probably know I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to use my trains. I know that sounds silly, but I promise it's not nearly as crazy as it sounds. Alright, so this train line right now runs from the west coast and it goes all the way around to the Spire Coast, which is where the plastic is being made. The thing is, I'm not actually using this rail at all. There isn't a train station that's using it on this side, and that factory isn't going to need any more plastic or rubber or anything else. So I have this line already laid from the Spire Coast all the way over here. So what I can do is just disconnect it at this point right here and send it on into the factory. So really, it's because I already did all this work and I want to use it instead of just letting it sit there idle. And I do love drones, but I do love having lots of trains driving around everywhere too. Back in the Spire Coast. Box Factory Row. Oh boy. And here we've got our train. So right now it's just loading up to 200, so I definitely don't need a Mark 6 belt, but gotta make up for that time where it pauses, you know. So it's hugely overkill. I could definitely make the train shorter, but if you ever have to expand a train, it's really just kind of a pain to do. So I just build them all the same size. So this train is just going to pick it up, and instead of waiting, just go ahead and just fly over there. And there it is. Here we are at the new section of the track. So, like I said, just deleted that section right there, and now it branches off to here, and just scoots right around to the other side, and then just runs right next to the other track that I have here. Here's my personal train, and then on the other side is the new train. So currently this just has plastic. My little train unload balancer. So for now, just syncing it just to make sure that we've got good throughput. And right now it says that I'm getting more than the 200, so I think we should be good. And SAM was the other thing that I needed to sort out. So like I mentioned, the 150 SAM from here wasn't quite enough, because what I need in total is 500. This one's a normal node, so even with overclocking and slooping all the constructors, I can get 300 reanimated SAM out of that. This one is overclocked and slooped, so I'm getting 150 out of here, meaning I'm still short 50. So for that, I could have gotten a drone or something. But why do that when you can make a ridiculous bus all the way through the Red Forest? So this bus just comes from right over here. Drops down here, and here we are to an impure node. And this is where I'm getting my last 50 from. If I've done my math right, which is a really big if, I don't actually need to sloop this one and I can leave it just overclocked. But for the next project, I need to sloop almost all the rest of the SAM in the world. But that's a problem for future Moo. The last major component that I haven't dealt with yet is water. So I'm thinking I can probably build a site just right about here. The smart thing would be to double check to make sure. Yeah, okay, so we can get water extractors. Wow, pretty much all over the place over here. It's always good to double check because there are some places where it looks like it's deep enough. Holy cow, you can place them all the way back into here? It's crazy. But then what in the world? That for, wow, okay. But then up here obviously isn't going to be deep enough. But yeah, I was actually surprised you can place them in here. The wet concrete is the bulk of the pipes. I only needed one pipe for the iron. And then I'm going to need, let's see, I need 1 pipe for each of the pairs. So that's going to be 10 pipes just for the wet concrete. And I'm pretty sure every pipe is over 300. So I'm going to need 2 water extractors for each one. So I need 22 water extractors. So let me figure out how I want to arrange those in here, and I'll show you what it looks like. And here we go. I think it came out pretty well. Or all I mean is just water extractors. So we can come on down to here. So instead of coming in directly from the ground level, I decided to add this. So eventually I'll finish the hyper tube. I'm not sure where those are going to connect in the main factory, but eventually I'll figure that out. So for now, it's just kind of not usable. So now it's nice little roof access. So we come in here, and now we can look down on all the water extractors. So, I think I should probably move this out 1 more, just because since it exits right there, I don't want to accidentally get sucked into it each time I run by. But we can come down here, and now we're just down onto the glass floor, so we can still see all of the glass pipes and all of our water extractors. And the majority of these are overclocked to 250, except for that 1 pair that's going to the iron node. That one's slightly less. The 22 water extractors didn't actually take up as much space as I thought they might. So all the pipes just get grouped together right here in the front, and then they go up onto this bus, and then straight into the factory. Since I'm just using walls here, I thought it would be easiest just to have these plug right into the wall, and then they can basically just come in right under all of the belts. Being approved. And then they just head down into here. I'm actually pretty sure I don't need these pumps. Really not that big of a difference from sea level to where the refineries are. So we're going to test it without the pumps. If I need it, I'll add them back. But if I don't need it, I'd rather just not have them. So the water comes in here, drops down, and then splits off to all the different sets of refineries. So the majority of them are all right here. And then there's the 1 lone pipe that just runs up along the top in this little corner here. And it just goes to the other side to where the iron is. And you know what? Having to deal with over 5,500 water per minute actually wasn't too bad. Now, I have already ran power all the way out to here. Now, I think I just need to find my way through here. There we go. So I think this just needs to connect to here. And that will get all the water extractors turned on, because I just like to pre-fill all the pipes and make sure everything's basically backed up. Ah, music to my ears. And the pipes are filling up. And we can check another thing off the list. Alright, and that is the bulk of the work done. So now the rest of it is kind of doing the odds and ends to make the startup process a little bit easier on myself. So what I'm going to do is I've already brought the lines out here, and the miners are obviously turned on. So with most of these, what I'm going to do is just add a smart splitter. And yes, I'm just going to clip it through some of these belts most likely. And then that way, that's definitely not on the belt. Because when I have this many belts and I want them to all get started at the same time, because really there's just too many belts for me to just manually plug them up to get this started. So for that, I just set up a bunch of temporary foundations, grab myself a bunch of awesome sinks. So I'm going to do this a bit neater. And the way you do it is you have the straight ahead, which is going into the factory, is going to be set to overflow. And then this direction is going to be set to any. And then that way I could just have these set up, and I'm going to have all of these attached to 1 priority power switch. And so for now, it's going to be turned on, and I can clear out the rest that's on this belt, right? And then the way that it'll work is I can go into my priority power switch from anywhere, and it's this unnamed one here. So if I turn that off, it backs up and everything just goes on into the factory. So when you have 10 to 15 different belts to get the factory up and running, this is a fun way to be able to just kind of do it with 1 flip of the switch. So I need to go around and set that up for all of the different ores, do a couple more odds and ends, I'm sure, and then I'm going to do my usual and spend way too much time doing some more decorating. Alright, so I changed my mind. There's one last thing I'm going to do before we go on our tour and then power everything on. So if we take a look at the power, Right now, it looks like it's still slowly climbing. Oh, maybe that's where it peaked. Like 197 is basically where it's topping out, it looks like. Yep, and then we're gonna start going back down. Okay, so I definitely have enough to get this next section of the factory up and running. But what I'm not so sure about is if I have enough to power on this factory and be able to get nuclear up and running. So even though this is the red forest, this spot right here is actually right on the edge of, I don't actually know what this area is called. I know this is like the northern forest. I don't know if this is still considered the northern forest, but basically this lake right here. The cool thing about this spot is there's a couple oil nodes. So what I did is I just placed one right here on the pure node. So I've got it completely overclocked to 600, and I've got a pump, and the pipe is already full. So this right here is on the world grid because, as a habit, I always build on the world grid. However, this lake doesn't really line up with the world grid that well, and I wanted to be able to use more of the coastline instead of it cutting at a really weird angle, and then I was going to have to get rid of all of these little trees. So this right here is one of the few things that's not on the grid. And we're going back to Old Faithful, because I think if I just add another 20, so if I just add 8 of this, that'll add another 20 gigawatts, and that'll definitely give me more than enough. I just really just don't want to have to worry about power, if you haven't noticed. And while I'm waiting, I can just go ahead and place these foundations real quick. And to finish this off, I just need to grab a Mark II pump for each one of these. And I'm going to place it right in the middle of the foundation and on the quarter mark, just like I did with the other ones. And then from here, we can just connect from the bottom up to the top. That'll be a nice bend. Then I just make a nice 90-degree angle turn right out of there, and I can line this up with the water extractor. So I'm just going to do that all the way down. And just like that, I've got another 20 gigawatts to play with. This one was actually super quick and easy. I think I did the whole thing in under 30 minutes. I think it's totally worth it. Just gives me the peace of mind. I just won't have to worry about it when I go to start up more factories. So now if we take a look, we're producing 270. And we'll probably peak around 192, 193 or something like that. Maybe even higher. Plenty of space to turn on this next factory and to turn on the parts to go nuclear. Now I can polish up the factory and we can go on that tour. Wow, with Bean next to it, this factory actually looks pretty big. So let me show you around. Oh yeah, Bean loves it. All right. So I finally added the rest of the highlights for the belt buses here so that it'll look uniform to the rest of them. And then I finally added the corners. I think from the top down it'll make a little bit more sense. But I think they came out pretty well. So this is what I did for this look. They are, of course, blueprints. So I basically just used the same one. So even though I could have made these bigger, but I kind of like this shape. So instead of it just being one big square, I brought this corner in by one foundation to just give it a little bit more depth instead of it just being one giant square that's all the same shape. Try to switch it up. I'm using carbon steel for the black and then the copper finish for these ones. And these are just coated concrete. And because it looks a little bit weird just having the difference between the two like that, I thought it was a much better look just using the 4-meter signs. Because then I get a cool stripe of light that goes all the way up and down. And usually the signs just pair up really well with the coated concrete in my opinion. And then I left this spot actually a little bit empty because in the future, I may actually have a use for these. But that is way down the line. And then for the walls, I of course just made more blueprints. These are just made out of concrete or asphalt, I can't remember. And then just using the small concrete pillars to frame the large billboards. So I could make these stripes be nice and bright. And then for the centerpiece, I wanted to make a cool circular window that was kind of centered on each of the manufacturers. Let me throw down a blueprint designer so I can show you how I did it. I didn't realize these things would go so far down. That's really cool. Alright, so if you want to create a circle like this, vertically anyways, what you want to do is start a little bit out. You can't start right on the edge. And I'll show you in just a second. You might be able to go halfway, but I think I did these just basically one foundation in, and then decide how tall you want it. But if you pick a multiple of 4, it's going to make your life a lot easier. But I think the whole thing is 48, so we don't want to go more than 24. So let's just go to 20. And then I'm going to go ahead and place a beam connector right there. And now with the small concrete pillar, I can snap it to the end and we can go all the way down. Alright, so now it comes for the challenging part. Now instead of default, I want to press R and switch it to diagonal. And now what I'm going to do is basically line it up right next to this one. And you could probably go out even to probably this distance. Now the cool thing about this is it really doesn't matter how far you make it. All you're trying to do is get the right angle. So right about there looks good. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. So yeah, right about there looks good. So the reason why I said it doesn't matter about the distance, because you're not actually going to go from here down. If you went from the top down, and I delete this one, these aren't really going to line up right. That's just not going to be nice and smooth. So what you want to do is go from the bottom. And since I'm only going 20 meters, it's going to be exactly 5 each time. And then that way, they will be the same distance every time, and they'll match up real nicely. Then we can just delete the beam, delete our extras, and do the same thing on the bottom. And this is why you can't start right at the edge, because once you get far enough around and you're going more horizontal, you still need to be able to attach this to the back end. So you just want to make sure you give yourself enough space on one of the sides. And then yeah, you basically just do this all the way around, and then I just delete these inside ones so it's just the outside. And that's how I created that circle. And I just put in some more beams afterwards and added some signs for the lights. I think it turned out all right. And then for the roof. So I made most of it asphalt, and then I decided to ramp up the roof just by a little bit. So it ramps up 2 on this side, but it only ramps down 1 on this side. And that way I could clip these into the curved part. That way, it was pretty much the only way I could get it to just all be smooth. Because working with circles and squares, you're going to have to get creative and do a little bit of clipping here. But since I already had the circle, I just put some ramps on the very top and then some double ramps. So if you look close, there is a tiny bit of a gap at the very edge, but that doesn't bother me. And I think it looks pretty cool. So that's where my drones are going. Still need some doors and whatnot, but for the most part, this is how I want it to be. The drones just fly in, drop down, and then pop back up. I think it's cool. All right, let's go inside and take a look. I actually created this blueprint, or a super similar one, for the electronics factory, but I ended up only putting it in one place, and then I don't think I showed it off or ever talked about it. So I decided to use it again here. Only difference is I raised it up one more foundation, and then that way I could just run the final belt straight through it. And that's all that's really in there, is the belt's just going to run straight through. And then I have a power storage on each side, so each floor of this thing has 4. It's definitely not the most you can cram in there, but I wanted to make a cool giant pillar that also had 12 batteries in there. And so I've got them all around the factory. And then I also created this blueprint. So down here it's stairs and the batteries, and then up here it's just basically the pillar to kind of take it all the way to the ceiling. I thought about having the stairs go all the way to the roof, but then I decided against it. So it just takes you in between the 2 floors. I may eventually put it in all 4 corners, but for now it's just in these front 2 corners. There's stairs that'll take you in between the 2 floors. So it's just 4 batteries stacked kind of right next to each other with a big concrete pillar in the middle to cover up the gap, or else you can kind of see through it and it looks a little bit weird. And it can hide some of the wires that way. Really simple, but it gives something for me to kind of build the stairs around. Since the factory is so big, I wanted to use the foundation stairs instead of using the walkway stairs. Alright, so the factory isn't 100% finished. But like I said, eventually I am going to come back here. I'm just saving some stuff for future move to add on to the factory, that's all. So I have a cool walkway up here that kind of looks down on everything, except for I kind of forgot that I haven't added a way to get from the normal part of the factory up to this walkway. But I still think it's cool, so I'm definitely going to leave it, and eventually I'll figure out how to get up there. So just using the frame ramps and inverted ramps to give it some support. And then down here, I have another kind of similar thing so that you can kind of look down on all of this stuff. And it's still the glass foundation, so we'll be able to see everything entering the particle accelerators. And then on the inside of these, I finally took care of the belt work in here. And so the 3 different ones come in. One's on a Mark 1, Mark 3, Mark 5, and then those just head on over into different ones. And then the final product pops down here, and then comes along here and exits to the side. And then that final product just comes out through here, goes through that blueprint like I mentioned, merges up with the other side, and heads on into the pillar. Each manufacturer is going to be outputting 25 Singularity Cells. And then the Singularity Cells just come in here. I just reused the same thing that I was using for the pasta. So those will come up here. Since this is already completely full of pasta, it's just going to immediately start sinking. I don't think I need to hold on to any of the Singularity Cells, but eventually I'm going to empty this storage container and throw them in the space elevator. So if I do, then I can just fill this up also. If not, I'll just delete the belt. Oh, made me nervous for a second, but it's blue. We're charging. It's not discharging, so we're good on power. I think it's those stairways and some of those other newer pillars I placed less than 30 minutes ago, so those are still charging. We're looking good on power. Just kind of want to see what this factory is going to increase it to. All right, just as a reference point, it looks like we're bouncing around between 18 and like 22. We'll see what it looks like afterwards. Well, it's my favorite time. Let's watch this come to life. So for the startup, the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to get everything for the dark matter crystals up and going. So I've separated the switches so that I can turn on just the limestone and the coal for these and the SAM. And then for the iron plates and the concrete, I'm going to wait until the dark matter crystals have at least made it up to basically the top of the lifts. Since they're on a Mark 1 belt and everything else is coming in at so much of a higher rate, it's best to stagger them for this. But before I flip the switch and get everything going, what I want to do is get the pasta flowing into the manufacturers. Because they go through so little that I might as well get those started. One last one to highlight. Alright, so I'm going to delete these, and then we're going to start the dark matter crystals, and then we'll do the iron plates and the concrete. Let's get that stopwatch going. Now that the dark matter crystals have made it up this far, let's go ahead and get everything else turned on. Just need the iron and the concrete. There they are. Beautiful, weird looking silver orbs. There they go. So it'll take probably another couple minutes actually to get all the way to the sink. So while that's happening, you've probably been able to notice that I have a little bit too much concrete on these belts. So there's only 8 of them, and instead of pulling out all of the excess, I think I'm just going to put a smart splitter right here, and then just a small storage. And then I'll just set it for the overflow, and then each time when it does get backed up and stop, that way I can kind of clear out the excess on all of these lines without interrupting anything. And that way the belt will just continue to look like this instead of it having to stop. So I'm going to do that for all 8 of the manufacturers just to get everything nice and clean the way I like it. And then we'll check in on the power and the awesome sink. Alright, I've let it run for a few minutes and all the lines are all cleared out. Everything is running nice and smooth at 100%. So let's go upstairs and take a look. 200 Singularity Cells a minute. So the one downside is I actually have plans for almost all of this. So these create a ton of sync points. However, I'm going to end up turning most of these into power. I think about 80% of these are going to be used making Fixonium. In the meantime, let's see how many points we're getting. Oh, that is awesome. Between 30 and 32, I will take it. That is mission complete. It's going to take dozens of hours before I actually get around to using these. So for now, I will gladly take all of those sync points. And now, let's take a look at the power. Alright, that's actually not bad at all. I really thought it was going to peak a little bit higher. But okay, so like 234 I think is about the highest we're hitting right now. And we're making 270. So that gives me plenty of wiggle room. Before I built the electronics factory, I only had 10,000 of stored charge. But with adding them into the factories, I've upped it to over 47,000. And so that'll really help too. So even if I were to get closer and it was going to peak every once in a while, until it just starts really consistently using way more than what I'm producing, my power grid is looking real good. More power is what I'm going to be working on next. So I decided out of all the places I could go, I think I'm going to build my nuclear power plant out here in the swamp. Thankfully, I have the bulk of the really complicated parts out of the way, but there's still a number of things that I'm going to need to build. And this project is going to rely really heavy on drones. So it's a good thing I made a whole bunch of fuel for those. I definitely won't be able to fit that all into one video, even if I were to make it pretty long. So it'll probably get broken up into 2, but there's quite a few things I need to make before I can start burning those fuel rods. So look forward to that, and thanks for watching.